In the early 2000s, tank technology research took some interesting turns. With the new millennium, many militaries wanted a massive leap forward in their capabilities. I don't think any country exemplifies this better than the US, where strange and advanced ground vehicles are being developed constantly. We're interested in one, the M8 Thunderbolt light tank. The Thunderbolt was an offshoot of the M8 armored gun system, a light tank the Army tried to procure in the 90s. It was supposed to be an air-deployable fire support asset for rapid deployment forces. With the fall of the Soviet Union and the resulting budget cuts, the M8 program was slashed right as it was entering service. The M1128 mobile gun system was developed to replace it. It was thought that the MGS would be more economical since it was based on the ubiquitous Striker 8x8, but it had a decent number of issues and wasn't universally liked. Later on, some in Congress expressed frustration that the AGS had been cancelled. Seeing the ongoing turmoil in the MGS program, United Defense decided to try selling the M8 to the US government yet again, and potentially to foreign customers as well. It wasn't enough to simply reoffer the same vehicle though. To make the vehicle more attractive, some radical steps would need to be taken. The first step was upgrading its armament. Though the original 105 was lethal in its own right, there were doubts about its growth potential. It was claimed the Striker could mount a 120, but to my knowledge, that never went beyond the blueprint stage. United Defense wanted to show they could mount a 120 in the M8, but just using a low recoil version of the M256 wasn't enough. They selected the XM291, an advanced cannon developed by Ardek and Bennett Labs, the same gun used on the M1CATTB and Thumper testbeds. The XM291 was also a 120, but compared to the M256, it was much more impressive. Despite being around the same weight, it had a longer barrel and less recoil. If necessary, it could be converted to a 140mm, all you had to do was swap out the ammo and barrel. It could also use electrothermal chemical technology, or ETC. We'll touch on that later. The 291's barrel length, combined with its high chamber pressure, meant that it was a pretty powerful gun. To feed the new gun, the M8's original loader was upgraded. The original was essentially a shrunk-down naval autoloader, and it worked quite well. Not only was it reliable, but it could load one round every 5 seconds. It held 21 rounds in total. With the upgraded loader, this capacity was reduced to just 15 rounds, but after some tweaking, they got that number up to 18. Rather surprisingly, the fire rate wasn't affected much at all, with the rate varying from 6 to 5 seconds per round. And since the 120 used combustible cases, it had to be modified to eject the stubs. The turret was equipped with a new second-generation higher thermal sight. In 2003, the modified turret was placed on a regular M8 hull and test-fired. This isn't where the upgrades ended though. In the 2000s, the US military had a marked interest in hybrid electric vehicles. Some examples would be the Advanced Hybrid Electric Demonstrator, AHED, or the Transformation Technology Demonstrator, also built by United Defense. In the case of the latter, its powertrain components were borrowed for Thunderbolt. 2 electric motors, attached to the drive sprockets, were placed in the front of the hull. These were connected to a diesel engine, which produced roughly 300 horsepower. The engine and batteries were placed in the sponsons. For people unfamiliar with tanks, the sponsons are the areas directly above the tracks. The new power pack gave the Thunderbolt some pretty unique capabilities. Not only was overall mobility still solid, but the range was extended massively. On a full fuel load, it could travel almost 1,000 kilometers. For reference, most diesel-powered tanks are in the ballpark of 400. On the batteries alone, it could travel 8 kilometers, making it incredibly silent. Aiding this was the all-new rubber track, which I briefly talked about in the video on the MPF program. Basically, this type of track improves range, noise signature, and ride quality. Since the power pack was moved to the front and sides, that freed up a lot of space in the back. United Defense claimed this could be used for a variety of tasks, but for the sake of demonstration, they used it to create a troop compartment that could seat 4, leading to one of the most cursed tank images I've ever seen. Carrying troops could be useful in the CFV role, but in reality, I think this space probably would have been used to store extra ammunition, especially since the whole MRAAS were occupied by the motors. The Thunderbolt's weight wasn't much higher than the base M8, only around a ton heavier. Later on, it was used to test ETC integration. ETC guns basically use plasma to ignite the propellant, leading to a much cleaner burn. This makes performance much more consistent. This modified Thunderbolt was called Lightning Bolt. As you can probably guess, Thunderbolt was never selected for service. It would appear again as the AGS-120, just with the regular M8 hull and power pack. The AGS-120 was never used either. I think the Thunderbolt sounds great on paper, but it probably had its fair share of issues. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.